Interviewing Mrs. Eileen Johnson at Latham headquarters is September 26, 2001. Michael Akey, the interviewer. Wayne Clark is the videographer. Mrs. Johnson, where were you born?
In the town of Brunswick, in the county of Rensselaer, outside of Troy.
And you grew up in Brunswick?
Yes.
Okay. Went to school there?
I did.
High school?
High school in Troy.
Okay. Troy High?
Catholic High.
Catholic High, okay. When did you graduate from Catholic High?
1940.
1940. What was Troy like in 1940?
Well, there were still a few, I think there was one line of a streetcar still left.
Really?
And Freihofer still had one horse-driven carriage to deliver bread. What else? Troy. By then, I was there during the fire of the City Hall in Troy.
Oh, really?
I didn't see it. I was going to school one day and people told me about it. Let's see. We went to Troy for our shopping, everything. We lived outside the city, but we did.
So Catholic High was a pretty good experience?
Yes, I'm glad I went there.
Good, good. Once you graduated, what did you do?
I went to Russell Sage College in Troy.
Oh, that's where my wife is.
Did she?
Yeah, that's where she's going now.
Oh, good for her.
How'd you like Russell Sage?
I got a very good education.
Good.
Made good friends, which I still have.
Now, do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, it was a Sunday, and I was at home, and I was with our family, and we were listening to the radio or something when we heard it. I don't remember other details, but I know that's when I heard about it.
You don't remember what impression it made on you?
No.
For many, the first question was, where's Pearl Harbor?
I think I knew. You know, I had been educated, and I think I knew where it was. I didn't know a lot about it, but no, I don't remember at the moment any more than that. The next day was a holy day for Catholics, the 8th of December, and the next day I remember hearing in a sermon about, well, not the details, we knew what had happened, but, you know, prayer and stuff.
So, you're at Sage. You completed your education at Sage before going in?
I did.
Okay, okay. And what was it like, how did Sage respond as a school to the war? Do you remember it all?
No, I can't think of any. Certainly we were aware of it.
Any restrictions?
No. No, it was just a girls' school at the time, still is.
Was rationing in effect at all?
At some time it was. I remember about butter and sugar and being rationed. And I don't remember whether gasoline was. It must have been. You know?
Did you know any of the fellows that were going into the service?
Yes, some of my classmates were.
Okay.
And later, one of my brothers went, and yes, the neighbors.
You have a feeling for, was it a fairly patriotic time at that point?
Oh, sure, sure.
Now, when you graduated from Sage, that would have been in what, 45?
44.
44.
Yes.
Okay. What coursework were you taking?
I was taking home economics because I wanted to be a dietitian and I wanted to go into the Army.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
You knew ahead of time?
Yes.
Why?
Because my older sister was a nurse and she had joined the Army before she was older than I. And she had. And I wanted to get in what was going on, the activity in the world. So,
Well, that would be one way to do it, wouldn't it?
yes.
So she had pretty positive experiences that you were aware of?
My sister?
Yes.
She didn't stay very long. She wasn't, women at that, when she got in, was either just before Pearl Harbor or after. Women were still not commissioned. She was a nurse. And then she got out before being commissioned to marry her husband. But yes, she wasn't in long, but it was positive. It was more that everybody else was going, and I wanted to go too.
Well, good for you.
And
So you graduated, and did you enlist at that point?
no, I went to Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. for a year of internship as a dietitian.
Oh, okay.
And at the end of that, we automatically were commissioned.
Oh, you were? Okay. What was your experience like at Walter Reed?
It was great. I was away from home, and I had new friends in a big city like Washington, D.C., and there was General Pershing from World War I had a suite on the top floor of Walter Reed Hospital, and we were not allowed to go in the suite. He wasn't well. It was, I think, a few years before he died, and he had an orderly who was a PhD.
Wow.
And we could talk to the orderly, and we also talked to General Pershing's sister, who was May Pershing from Texas, and she came often to visit her brother. And we talked to her, as a dietitian, we talked to her about the general's diet. And I remember one day she wanted a lamb chop for her brother. He didn't eat much, he only ate a little bit. And she wanted a lamb chop, and we didn't have one lamb chop in Walter Reed Hospital, so they took a truck all the way to another Army installation in Silver Spring to get one lamb chop for General Pershing. But, that was the way it was. And May Pershing wasn't easy to please, no matter what we did. It was difficult.
Really?
She tried to run his life well. Do you want this on video?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We had, at that time, we had 2 or 3 mess halls for the hospital, and they were still segregated. We had a black mess hall. They're still segregated. And because we were dietitians, we got to know the cooks very well. And I remember that one head cook who was very handsome, a black man, who had gone to Howard University for a short time. And we asked him why he dropped out. And he said, well, what can I do as a black person after I graduate? And we had one of our dietitians, head dietitians, was a survivor of in the Philippines, the Bataan March. She was a survivor.
Oh, really?
And we were told by the head dietitian not to ask her questions about it. And we didn't.
So what was life in Washington like?
I lived in a dorm on the campus of Walter Reed.
Oh, you were in the dorm?
But we went to Rock Creek Park on our own. And we went downtown, of course, and I was there during VE Day. And went downtown, we were almost overwhelmed with all the military people trying to kiss us and hug us and everything. We were in uniform, so.
So it was pretty exciting.
It was very exciting place to be. Yes.
How were women treated?
Fine. I never, even in the Army, I never had any difficulty as a woman. Never.
Really?
Not being, well, we got whistled at, but after all, we were young and pretty and everything. So I never had any trouble with anybody.
Were your officers pretty good at Walter Reed?
Yes, one wasn't, but the others were. I learned. We had classes every day. We worked on the job, and we had classes every day. And we had to copy a lot of notes. It happened to be our classes. We worked in the mornings, and our classes took place after lunch. And I still, to this day, get tired after eating a big meal. And I remember in my notes in the classes, I'd be writing, but it wasn't anything because I was falling asleep. But I managed to graduate from the class.
Well, that's good. And you became first, second lieutenant?
Second lieutenant.
So, who did Walter Reed generally treat? Was there a particular
Yeah,
clientele?
very VIPs.
VIPs.
Military, although, yes, VIPs, military, but we also had, wish I could remember his name, a very important person from England. He was a patient. I don't believe he was a military person. He was very much of a gentleman. I remember going in to talk about his diet to him, and he was very much of a gentleman.
So it was a pretty good clientele there.
Yes, we also had the boys that came back from the front. Some arms missing, some legs missing. It was a new experience for me and Walter Reed. It was a very well kept hospital, but they kept the floors highly polished all the time. And these men were on crutches and sometimes fell. I'm not criticizing because I didn't run the place, but
Right.
it was an experience. We ate in the officers' mess, and one time they asked us. They said some prisoners, former prisoners, were coming from the Pacific, and they were going to go through our hallway to another mess. So please don't talk to them, is what they said. They didn't want us talking. I can understand. They were just coming back from the front, And so it was a very enlightening time that I had there.
Did you get to know any of the soldiers that served in the front?
Yes, in fact, one had leukemia, and I remember he painted as a hobby, and he painted not my picture, some other people's pictures, and he gave me the pictures, and then he was discharged and went back home to, I think it was Brooklyn, and anyhow he was stationed as a patient in St. Vincent's Hospital in New York City, and I happened to have a friend, another dietitian who was working there at the time, so she got to meet him. We kept up correspondence for a while, and that was one person.
Now, after your stint at Walter Reed, where did you go?
I went to Brooke General Hospital at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, for basic training.
Oh, what was that like?
It was fun. I met some more people. We lived among the personnel, the Army personnel, in a two-story barracks. And I remember one night two of us had dates for downtown. Do you want me to talk about this?
Absolutely.
Dates for downtown San Antonio, which wasn't far away. So we met them. I remember meeting them we were told to meet them near a palm tree I don't know if it was the Hotel San Antonio, but at the time it was a very well-known hotel. And we had a good time that night. We came home late. We couldn't get in the door. It was two-story barracks. We couldn't get in the door, so we decided to climb the fire escape to the second floor, and that door was open. And we got in. Everybody else was asleep. We got in. And the next day, somebody nailed that door, locked, shut. I don't know who squealed on us. I never did know, but then, well, that was another experiences when we only had, by that time the fighting part of the war was over with, and so we only had 1 hour of basic training. And I remember trying to learn to march, which was difficult to keep in step. And it was a very good experience.
How'd you like Texas?
I liked it. We got down across the border to Naval, Laredo, which is still the only part of Mexico that I've seen. No, is that Laredo or Nuevo? I forget which is on which side. But it was a new experience. I liked it.
So basic went pretty well for you?
Yes. I think it was 3 months, I'm not sure, I think it was 3 months.
The marching, was that the toughest part?
Well, we didn't get blamed or anything, we only had an hour to learn it, you know.
Right.
People before us, including women, had to go under barbed wire and I think live fire, and we didn't have to do that.
Okay.
That was part of it. I don't remember much else about what we did, and we must have had classes.
And after basic, what happened?
I had orders to go to Camp Cooke, California.
Huh? Well, you're getting around the country.
I had asked, we were allowed to ask for 3 choices when we were commissioned, and I asked for the Pacific, because by then the war in the Atlantic was already over with. And I asked for the Pacific and didn't get it. And I forget what other places, but I did ask for California as one of the choices, and that's where I went.
What type of facility was it that you went into?
Camp Cooke had a station hospital for the 13th Armored Division, and I worked at the station hospital.
Now, what are the general duties of the dietitian?
To supervise mess halls, to order food, to take care of special diets, you know, to visit patients on special diets, and try to make a patient feel as comfortable as possible nutritionally. You
Right.
know?
Right. Pretty challenging work at times?
It wasn't that difficult, no. No, it wasn't.
So you were in California for how long?
Well, Camp Cooke closed. Let me see, I went there in October, and it closed the next year, I think it was. The next year, I can't remember when I was sent to Letterman General Hospital in San Francisco.
Oh, what was that like?
Well, at that time, Letterman General was just a one-story wooden building and built as shall I say, a square with a courtyard in the middle, and palm trees all over. And I know now, I've heard that it's several stories high and it's a big building up there. I haven't seen it. And there, I took care of special diets sometimes. I remember one time I was on a ward in the kitchen doing something, and a doctor came in and said, "Would you drape a patient?" He had a woman patient, and he thought, see, we wore the same uniform as a nurse with a cap. We had a little insignia showing us as dietitians, but the same uniform as a nurse. And I never had draped any patient. He thought, I realized much later he thought I was a nurse. So I went in and he handed me the sheet, and I stood there, and I think he helped me with what I was supposed to do. But anyhow, that was one incident I remember.
So you were at Letterman for about how long?
Mother got sick, and I got out ahead of time. I have my notes there.
No, that's okay.
I got out in the spring. I think it was about May of 1946, 47. I forget, 46 or 47. Did I get my notes?
Discharged May 47.
May 47.
Okay.
I was discharged because mother was sick, and the Red Cross and my doctor got me out.
Now, so you came back to Troy?
I did.
Okay. Now, it mentions you also served in Korea.
I did.
Okay, so did you go into the reserves?
Yes.
Ah.
When we were decommissioned, we had a meeting where we were told about insurance and all the things as I forget what the meeting is called. And we were told about all those things. And we were told as women not to bother with insurance because, you know, they all thought we were going to marry and our husbands would have. It was a different age. And so I didn't take out the insurance. But what was it you asked me?
Reserves.
Oh, yes. Well, we were told about the reserves, so I signed. Why not? We're not going to have another war. This was 1947. We weren't going to have another war, so I signed up for the reserve. And that's how I got called back for the Korean.
Now, when you came back to Troy, what did you do? You just
Mother was sick.
took care of your mother?
Yes. Eventually, I don't know how much longer, I worked as a dietitian in civilian life.
Oh, okay. Whereabouts?
I went two different places. One was, I know, I went to what was then New York State Veterans Rest Home in Wilton,
Oh, okay.
above Saratoga, Wilton.
Right.
The only state that had a veterans rest home.
Oh, what was that like?
It's a beautiful place. The place was on top of a mountain and had been built by the it had been built by the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company for their tubercular patients.
Oh.
Because previously there was a great deal of tuberculosis
Right,
after
right.
World War I. And so then the state owned it, and I worked there as a dietitian. It was a beautiful, beautiful place.
Mhm.
And we had a lot of patients from the city of New York as well as other places.
And after that,
I resigned in the fall of, I don't know. I have
well, that's
no idea.
approximate.
Later, I resigned in the fall and knew I was in the reserve and that they were going to call up reservists.
Okay.
So
Around 50, 51?
I think it was 51 that I was called up in January.
So you expected to be called up?
Yes.
And,
They were calling up all the reservists.
Okay. So you're recommissioned,
Yes.
and where did they send you?
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Fort Dix, New Jersey. What did you think of Fort Dix?
Well, it was fine. My sister, who had been in previously, had been stationed there, and she had talked about the officers having white tablecloths and the tables, and in the mess hall, and I remember that part, which we did have. And while I was there was a bad airplane accident at McGuire Air Force Base, which was sort of adjoining Fort Dix. It was Air Force, but it was right near them. And the airplane went into the ground, and everyone on it was killed. And we went later to see the big hole that had been there. And then I went up to New York City. From there, my sister was living in Arlington, Virginia. At the time, I went down there to see her. I remember when I wanted to go shopping in New York City, and I didn't have much money with me, so I wore my uniform. We didn't have to wear uniforms then, I guess. I wore my uniform up to New York City and went to Chase Manhattan Bank and said, I'd like to take out some money, but I don't have an account. So, you know, I knew the uniform would help a little bit. So the officer there said, well, I told him where I had an account, so he called up my hometown, the bank there, and they compared my signatures, which I wrote. They compared it with the copy that the bank had, and I was allowed to get some money. It was fun. I went shopping. I don't know if you want me to talk about
That's
those
fine.
things. Sounds as though the whole thing was a party. It was in a way, but we also worked, you know.
Was the Korean, did you have a different feeling about the Korean War in the service than you did about World War II?
While I was in, I don't think it so while I was in. I can't remember. World War II seemed to be on a much greater, you know, all other countries were involved
Right.
in a much greater event. I can't remember feeling differently about
Okay.
it.
The, so you were in for the duration of the Korean War?
No, Mother got sick again,
Ah.
and I was allowed to get out. So I got out as a first lieutenant
Oh, very good.
because I had been in long enough to be one.
Right, right. Now, was that the, you didn't stay in the reserves, did you?
Not this time. No.
Got a little smarter this time.
No, I will say I'm glad I was in the service, and I'm glad I saw the men and women who were in the service for their for what they did. 'Cause
Mhm.
I remember them coming home as casualties, and some not coming home, and no one can ever say anything a bad thing to me about any veteran, because I saw for myself what went on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even though I was not in combat.
Right. So overall, it was a very positive experience for you?
Very, very. I was doing, my work was what I was trained for,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, it was. I still keep up with veterans' things today because of that experience.
Do you still keep up with people that you'd met in the service?
Not that I knew then. People I've met since then who were in the service, I keep up with.
So it's really not a unit to go to.
No, I know people go back to reunions, and I can't because I didn't belong to one unit. We went from different hospitals, and you know, in both wars. So I can't go to reunions, but I can go to other things.
Well, that's good. That's good. Any other stories that you can think of while you were in the service?
When I was in Letterman General in San Francisco, one of the patients I went to see was General Stillwell. What was his first name?
Joseph?
General Joseph Stillwell. And it was shortly before he died. I don't remember what his illness was, but he was very much of a gentleman, very much. And then afterward, his son, who was a pilot, flew his ashes, after he died, flew his ashes over the Pacific. He was very much of a gentleman. When I was at Walter Reed, we had entertainment, usually outside in a certain place in the grounds where people like Bing Crosby and Roy Rogers with his horse and all these celebrities came to entertain.
So were these USO shows? Or are these just...
They may have been, I'm not sure.
So did you get to meet any of these people?
Perhaps shaking their hands,
Okay.
but no more personal thing than that.
So this was quite an adventure.
I was glad I went. I really, as I said, you have to be there to see things. You know?
Right. Well, I'm sure that gave a young woman plenty of opportunities to travel that she wouldn't have otherwise had.
Right.
Very good. Well, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was some insights that we haven't gotten yet. We appreciate it.
I don't know. I didn't mean to sound like a joke, but of course you do.
No.
You know, I wasn't in combat, so.
That's okay. It's all part of the story, isn't it?
I'm still on camera.